here. With emotions running high as the US presidential election climaxes, India needs to adopt a cool and considered attitude to further the bilateral relationships, irrespective of whether one hates or loves President Donald Trump or former Vice President Joe Biden. Reason deterred requires India to plan and strategize to deal with whoever American voters will send to the White House. Should Trump remain in office, it will be less of an adjustment for India because the momentum that has already been generated will carry on. The remarkable timing of an in-person India-US 2+2 dialogues, which was held barely 1 week before election day, showed what the parameters and potential are if Trump secures 4 more years at the helm. The Narendra Modi government has figured out a plan with Plan A with Trump, and it just has to be executed smoothly. But in the event of a Biden win, India has to have a plan B based on understanding where he comes from, what he stands for, and how he can be harnessed to advance India's national interest. Broadly speaking, a Biden presidency will remain committed to the India-US comprehensive global strategic partnership, but in the light of extreme policy volatility that has befallen the US in recent time, Biden will consciously look to repudiate many of Trump's actions and approaches to world affairs. Therein lie opportunities which India should capitalize on. A Biden presidency will be less transactional and competitive than Trump's, vice versa, the US traditional partners and allies. If Trump populist worldview deemed very single nation on earth an economic rival that is taking advantage of the US through unfair rules. Biden's track is going to be the liberal one of the distinguishing friends, especially Democrats, from foes and being generous to the former. A low-hanging fruit India must pursue if a Biden administration comes in is to settle trade disputes that has raged on despite several rounds of negotiation under Trump. The economic nationalism spearheaded by Trump cost billions of dollars of export losses to India and denied us the generalized system of preference privileges that we deserve as a developing country. Trump's mocking of India as a tariff king and his unwillingness to conclude even a mini trade deal unless India made more concession belied the simple reality that India's overall trade surplus with the US in pittance compared with the US deficit with China, Germany or Spain, Japan. Owing to the bipartisan anti-China sentiment and absolutely negative public perception of China in American society, a Biden presidency cannot afford to lift the massive Trump-era tariffs on China. In contrast, India is not a red meat political issue in Washington. If Biden is in the Oval Office, an early and amicable closure to the trade war with India is possible and worth following through. It will be a booster for India's post-COVID economic recovery. In the geopolitical sphere, Biden has vowed to revive the Iran nuclear deal that had been the signature Middle East initiative of the Barack Obama administration. This is a favorable stance for India because Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran had the unintended effect of limiting India's investment and development of the strategic Chabbar port, a crucial venture to keep Pakistan under check and prevent Chinese encirclement on 4 western flank. If there is a fresh Iran-US thaw, India will also get more options and space to counter jihadist extremists and ensure Afghanistan stability. The Indo-Pacific is the ultimate touchstone of the India-US partnership. While Trump moved during the latter part of his part-time to aggressively consolidate ties with a range of partners, there are pushed back against China. The regional architecture is still not solid enough to deter Chinese offensive behavior. Part of the problem has been Trump's disinterest in formulating an identifiable formal policy toward the Indo-Pacific, except to insist that the US wants a rules-based order and freedom of the sea lines of communication. If Biden is in change, India must nudge him on the Obama-era pivot or rebalance to Asia strategy, which had set specific targets for relocating the US military away from the Middle East and concentrating maximum US naval assets to ring-fence China in its backyard. Since Biden is also a professed believer in a multilateral US foreign policy, he will be all ears to ideas for New Delhi and Washington to team up with other China-aware countries and form a united front. Unlike Trump, Biden will not be as tight-fisted when it comes to financing infrastructure and connectivity projects in the Indo-Pacific, which are as important as a collective military pushback to rein in the Chinese dragon. With a receptive Biden around, India and the US can identify a number of power countries in South Asia and the Indo-Pacific and jointly implement economically beneficial projects as trustworthy and safe alternative to China's debt trap diplomacy. Of course, India must temper its exceptions on how far the US of today can go in opening its purse strings and carrying out a proactive foreign policy. Should Biden be the next president, his foremost priority will be overcoming the domestic challenges of the pandemic and pulling America out of its socio-economic crisis. Even he personally wants a reinvigorated US role in the international arena. The era of American interventionism and power projection in faraway parts of the planet is gone. India must be rational and try to make the most of a possible Biden presidency, but we should also be clear-eyed that the US is not the be-all and end-all for achieving our strategic goals. Smart forward planning with lowered exception will serve us well. BN Das report for Shakti TV USA.